Hey everyone, I finished War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, so let's talk about this. We're not going to talk about the themes, the topics, the plot, probably a little bit about the content, but not as much as about my reading experience, how I finished it, my struggles, and what I think makes the book so hard and challenging. So, why did I want to read War and Peace in the first place? I honestly can't say. I was in my teenage years when I first decided that I want to read War and Peace. I don't really remember how I got that idea. I'm guessing I saw it on TV somewhere, and I'm just hoping it's not that Peanuts episode where Charlie Brown reads it over the weekend, because let's talk about setting up false expectations. This is not a book that you can read over the weekend. But I didn't know I had this idea. And because teenage Wiebke grew up in a small town Germany before the internet, she just went to a bookstore and bought this. This is a double bind-up of War and Peace in German, and I started reading. I didn't like it. I didn't get along with it. The translation was leaving everything that was said in French and put the German translation in footnotes. So pretentious Wiebke had French in school, and I was still in school at that point, so I could understand the French, but not enough to be sure I understood everything. So I read the French text and the translations in the footnotes and read everything double, which, as you can imagine, really decreased the reading enjoyment I had. I keep telling myself I read 200 pages in this before I gave up, but I found a bookmark at page 16, so I don't know if I've been lying to myself. But ever since this bad experience with the novel and the story, I don't really think I got anything off the story in my teenage years. But I always meant to keep continuing to read and pick it up one day. But I never did. So, somewhat 25 years later, I dropped a lot of the pretentiousness I had towards this book and was more interested in getting it done, having it read, and not sitting down with the book and analyzing it and experience it as a world-class literature thing. So that helped, discarding this expectation of it being a great book that will reward myself with something. So I completely discarded the idea of picking up this translation again. And I decided at some point I'm going to listen to the audiobook. So I went for an audiobook production by the same team that also did Anna Karenina, which I listened to and also didn't enjoy, but that's a different story. So I knew that the production would be okay and that I would like the narrator and that he would do a good job, which he did. The narration is well done, the production is well done, the translation didn't include all the French, just a little bit, short sentences, so that was better. So, commentary on the translation here. Even though people say it doesn't really matter which translation you use, pay attention how much translation is still to be done in the book of a language that you don't understand. Since I gather that a lot of this was written in French because they talk in French all the time in Russia at that time. And yeah, I don't know why you had to leave it in, but that's making it harder if it's not translated in the language you can speak immediately and you have to read footnotes for that. That really didn't help. But in the German audiobook, it wasn't like that and I enjoyed it. Well, still didn't enjoy it. The book starts off with a huge party in high society, Moscow or St. Petersburg, I forgot, and you get introduced to a lot of people. You know, Tolstoy, Russian literature, a lot of people. And I don't usually mind multiple perspectives or multiple people that we focus on and hear the stories of. So I'm pretty good with that. But still, I get lost in Tolstoy's books. And I recommend ignoring it. Over the course of this book, it's about 1,000 pages, 60-something hours I listened to it. You will get the characters and the people straight. It's like a puzzle. You remember something later in the book that happened to a person earlier where you didn't connect it to that person. So give it time to put the people together as one person. So aside from the many people, I felt myself being drawn back into the stories or into the narration like I felt in Anna Karenina. Although I couldn't put my finger on it, what I didn't like there then. Now I can say that you get introduced to a lot of people and it's very descriptive and using a lot of adjectives. But for me, it doesn't work. I like descriptive literature. I like when the author describes the scenery, puts up a really flowery language to the people and the surrounding. But with Tolstoy, it feels like a checklist. Like, I need to mention this, 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 and this. And I also need to mention this. I need to use adjectives to describe the people and give them character and personality. But it doesn't happen. So I think what makes it the hardest is connecting to the people. For me, everything was distant. I didn't feel for anyone. I didn't care for anyone. So reading about 1,000 pages about 100 or something people that you actually don't really care about is hard. And I think this is what a huge part of the struggle with this book is. That it's not easy to get connected to the story and the characters. So I listened to it for hours of this party and a lot of other society things happening. And then we get to the war part. And I don't know how I managed to be surprised by detailed descriptions of war. It's called War and Peace. And I was like, why am I listening to detailed descriptions of war and battle and how the camp looks and what the clothes are and everything? So I was pretty much bored in stretches of army talk. You can already tell I don't know how I managed to finish this, but it kept going like this. You alternate between war scenes, the families and the peace scenes, or the people who are not directly in war, parallel. We're basically in the Napoleonic Wars, by the way, in early 1800s. So my biggest advice for getting through this book is just keep going. Ignore if you don't get everything, if you forget something, or you're not completely detailed on something. It either makes sense later, or it wasn't that important. So to get to the story, which was my goal with doing this, to get to the story to see what everything is about, I just kept listening. There was a lot of eye rolling. Sometimes you could hear me walking around listening to it, and people kept staring at me, and I was just like, I don't care, I'm gonna finish this. This is gonna be my reward that I'll finish. And the audiobook I listened to came in 4 parts, so it's basically 4 audiobooks. After 2 audiobooks, I think something in the narration changed, and I'm not sure if I didn't pick up on it earlier or if it just started there. So about halfway through, the commentary or the parts around the war narration and scenes turn into a commentary on the historical references and how history presented this war and the people in the war and the ideas that came out of it. So it got more interesting, which is kind of annoying, happening halfway through a 1,000-page book. So halfway through, I got a little bit more interested in the war stories because it added commentary. But it, on the other side, also made me aware, much more aware than I already was, that I have no clue about the history of the Napoleonic Wars. I know that Napoleon went to Russia and then didn't win. That's good, isn't it? Yeah, so basically, this is very informative about this time and the history, but it's also very opinionated. So I feel a problem I often have with historic novels that I don't know enough history to know how much is true and how much is fake and how much is just made up. So I did like the narration more by then. I got used to the talk. I still wasn't connected to any of the characters. I really didn't care about anyone. Still, I was pretty much annoyed with some, and the war parts were, war parts still. But I kept going, and the story progressed, and things happened, and people die, people live happily ever after, disaster. You know, everything you expect from a big epic novel. But then it ended. And we got an epilogue. And I think that's supposed to 2 or 3 hours long. And in that epilogue, there's this thing that Tolstoy does, which I hate the most. He points out how he thinks you should live your life. The character that he was rooting for the whole time and he was presenting as the most righteous and admirable character, we see how his life turned out after the war and how everything turned out well for him. And yeah, can't stand that either. So basically, in retrospect, I'm very happy to finally have read it. I think going for it for the story and the content just for the first time is helpful. And if you want to read more of it, you can go back and analyze it. I think it can be a rewarding book for people who actually are interested in the history and comparing the notes and the things he says to his historical presentation and representation nowadays, and maybe to how it was represented at Tolstoy's time, if there are changes. I think that's really interesting if you're interested in that. The same with the Russian society and how life was at that time. He gives you a detailed description if you're interested in that. I'm more interested in people and reading about people and connecting to people. I can't do that with his writing, and I can't imagine that I'm the only one. I think this is a big struggle with trying to get through War and Peace, that there are so many things that you're basically not interested in, and he doesn't draw you in with his writing automatically. Maybe it does work for some people, but for me, I really don't know. And I think this book does have its spot as important literature, but I don't think it's a must-read. We over-exaggerate the fact that we must read this book because content-wise, it's very specific. And I don't think it taught me anything outside of that because the people are just annoying and I couldn't connect to them, so they just annoyed me more and I didn't want to learn anything from them. And like I said, Tolstoy likes to tell you how to live and what's right and what's wrong. It's an interesting historical fact, but it's not a must-read. If you stayed this long, thank you very much. Now, I don't know, have you read War and Peace? Have you attempted it? Does this help you in trying to do or not do, or change your mind about it? Did you like reading it? Tell me if you like the writing, if you have read it. Can you connect to his characters? Like, I'm really curious, and I'm sorry this video turned out to be so long. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye.